that they just wouldn't, everyone would feel safe, you know, and that's really important. And people don't realize when you're doing healing work and you're working with really big energies like this, all this stuff that's happening with race, it is a big energy because they're literally fallen ancestors as well that hang around us, and they're negative energies that hang around us that feed off the pain and the trauma that we're in. They feed off all the horrible things that have ever happened to us. And so when we don't consciously clear those things out of the space, they do bring a bit of interference. It's kind of like this kind of energy that's around. And anyone who's sensitive to energy, anyone who's done any opening of their third eye or opening of their soul bodies can pick up on it, and they'll just contract. But again, if you don't know how to do that, simplest thing is love. Like love just opens, and forgiveness, like that energy in itself is the most powerful healing vortex you can ever create in the space.
I want to also add something, and first of all, I just want to say that I'm grateful that you're feeling safe in this circle, because that's really the intention, and I think intention is powerful. This, we're talking about reconciliation. And every word, if you look at the website and even how this circle is described, the first thing is described as a place of non-judgment. And I think the intention is that we also have the understanding that we are co-creating this reality. And that's also outlined in the way this circle was intended and has been created, is that as Nyanda shared, the intention is really that we are all co-creators of this reality. So there's not one creating and the other one, being a victim, but all of us are running programs. And the only way to actually dismantle this is to do the inner work and do that shift within. So I think intention is important as you join circles, conversations, wherever you go. The intention of this circle is to do love work. And I think that's also the energy that has been carried around, but also bring diversity. I mean, this is the 9th circle. We've had about 15 different people speaking, and for those of you who have been here since the beginning, it's been very diverse. The circle also is not intended to shape people into one narrative, but to really expose people to that diversity. And again, it comes back to what Nyanda was saying, where we've been so conditioned to have zero tolerance for difference. And that's one of the things this circle has been doing, is really trying to bring people who are so different each time, so we get to hear almost the same story, because we're always talking about the racial disharmony and what we're experiencing, but from so many angles. In the past 9 circles, we've already had 15 different vision and stories of the same thing. And I think as we start to expand, and this circle is going to continue, so we're going to have more and more and more. And as we see how people, this same issue is seen from all angles, we start to dismantle all these different things within ourselves. So I think, to respond to your question, is really also the intention that's being put into our gathering. It's an intention of love. Yeah.
And so I was going to say, that's so true. And the thing that you do that maybe they can try in the other circle is that you set that intention in the beginning each time. And so it's not just that it's you don't leave it to chance. You set it. And so that's very important as well.
And that's something I've been trying to do, is just to go in and be present with what everyone is sharing, because and try not to let it get to me in a deeper way that makes me feel that shame, or that brings it up. Thank you for that insight, Tanya.
I would say, also just I think there is a part where things are being triggered. Of course, we're all constantly triggered by different things, but I think there's also kind of that acknowledgement of where you can be. And I think if places are really creating too much turmoil within yourself, maybe, once you're aware of, okay, now I'm aware that something is triggering and maybe it's shame, I don't know, you can then step aside and work on that versus just re-triggering and wounding yourself even more. Because that's, because sometimes I think in our also education, and maybe I think that's part also of the shaming, is that if you're not showing up, it's like this vicious cycle. It's like you're not feeling you're feeling the shame, but also if you feel that you're not showing up, that shame is just increasing, etc. And I think part of self-care is like acknowledging, okay, I have this trigger of shame, and maybe I can step aside and work on it, but find different ways versus just wounding yourself more.
Mm-hmm. And just one more question on how to move forward with this. I think a lot of us in this space have that deeper awareness of this non-dual reality and perspective. And in these other spaces where I feel that there's this perpetuation of duality that's kind of unconscious, how do we move forward with that? I mean, I don't know how to invite that awareness. I mean, I feel capable of inviting it in myself, but I'm not sure how to expand that necessarily in the spaces around me.
So one of the wonderful things about so the Gene Keys that I mentioned earlier, that's a self-teaching modality, and it's really affordable. Like, you just buy the book and you just start watching yourself, and you start when you meditate, you just watch the patterns in your life. That's literally the practice, and then you see what the pattern is trying to teach you. But the beauty that I find with doing any kind of shadow work is that you don't even need to have a conversation with someone. They feel the shift has happened in you on a very psychic level. Whether they believe in any of the stuff or not, it literally just happens. It's like I noticed it with my mom, because me and her would butt heads on the shadow all the time. And I remember I used to feel judged by her. That was the shadow that I used to feel all the time, was the shadow of judgment. Now, the other side of the shadow of judgment is this ability to be like this all-seeing eye that sees things from the full perspective, and that it's also a very powerful gift of like having integrity. And so I started actually just visualizing my mom when she'd call me as this old owl lady, instead of like, oh, she's going to be judging me. Like, I stopped seeing her in her shadow, and then I noticed that because I was now willing to see her in a higher perspective, she felt that, and she would actually just step up into that. It's like, because every shadow has what's called a gift, and it has what's called an enlightened state. So there's different stages. Everyone has all of these things all the time. They're just archetypes. So someone who's in an active shadow state also has the higher state within them. And when we stop looking at people as victims, they feel that, and they actually step out of it. It's like, because we're now projecting a different version of what we see in them, like a higher version that maybe they haven't fully been ever allowed to step into. So it's a wonderful practice. And if you get the Gene Keys book, and if you check out the website, there's like all these courses you can do to teach yourself more about it. But it's basically like a journey that you go on with the Gene Keys, and it takes years, but because we are that deep, it's not like a quick little fix. It's a long, nourishing journey that just keeps on giving to you. But I noticed that with me and Max, whenever we get into fights, when I witness myself in a shadow and then witness him in a shadow, I don't hold on to that shadow perspective. I look at where his soul is trying to go, and I see him in that, as opposed to focusing on the negative, the shadow. And I noticed that things resolve, because actually the charge dissipates when our heart opens up to, okay, I'm not just going to see this person as this triggered, angry victim. I'm just going to see that they're having a moment, because they're trying, their soul is learning about this particular pattern, but this is actually who they really are, and this is where they're trying to go. So if you go into your seeing these people, like whatever the, just give me a couple of the other emotions that you witness in the circle, and I'll tell you like the higher version of them.
The vibrations I'm witnessing in the other or in myself?
No, in the other circle, like you know, like just anything that comes out that's triggering.
I feel misplaced anger.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And
so that could be also judgment.
Right, this indication that, oh, you won't be judged, but that if I say something, I actually will feel that judgment coming at me.
So going into this place, not seeing these people as these angry, judgmental victims, because the other side of victim is freedom. So anyone who's actually in a strong victimized state is actually really embodying the gift of freedom. So, and Black people are really free. Like when you see them dancing and expressing themselves, they're just in this like incredible, powerful, free state that they sometimes forget that they can just tap into that. So instead of like going into the circle with this expectation that that's the energy that you're gonna get, going into the circle with this higher awareness of where these people are at on a higher level that they may not even be fully aware of all the time, but that's how you view them. When they actually witness you viewing them in that way, they'll feel that, and it'll shift how the dynamic is. It's like it totally shifts the energy.
That's a beautiful insight. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I would really, I mean, that's from my own experience. I can highly recommend Gene Keys. When Nyanda introduced me to the Gene Keys 5 years ago, I remember after that, and we just had a session, and I decided to go on the journey. And you can go on the website and ask for your profile. And then I went, I think it was for 10 days or 2 weeks on a silent retreat, just with my Gene Keys book, notebook, and just, you know, kind of silence and just working on that. And I was crying, literally. I mean, the insights were so profound. And I think what Nyanda was sharing is that as you start doing the work, you actually feel the shift within your body. It's all based also on epigenetics, the fact that our genes are not not things that you can't change. These codes, you can actually change them as you work on yourself. And I think this is so powerful and potent in these times where we really want to see the change. Maybe, I mean, before we answer the other questions, maybe Nyanda, you can, you know, give some recommendations on how people could go about the Gene Keys, and maybe some of the, you know, powerful insights. I share my experience, but, you know, as a practitioner and an expert on Gene Keys, maybe some of the things that people can benefit from.
Okay, so on the Gene Keys website, it's just if you just Google Gene Keys, it's the first thing that'll come up. And it was created by an Englishman called Richard Raj, whose life's work is pretty much exposing the shadow, you know, which a lot of people shy away from. But actually, this is our darkest spaces, like hold the most power and illumination. So I remember when I started doing Gene Keys, no one saw me in Bali for like 2 weeks as well. As soon as I did my chart, so you can go on the website and put in your birthday and your time of birth, and it'll create a chart, and that chart has the information of the 12 archetypes that you signed up for as a soul. Learn, and you are learning you learned them from your parents, from people at school growing up, but basically these are the things that were like the hardest for you to resolve. So you're like, okay, this life I'm learning how to forgive. You know, that's like my life's work is learning how to forgive. So Max's actually his life's work is forgiveness, and the shadow of intolerance. You know, so and mine is the shadow of turbulence. So and the gift of compassion. So this was like the biggest thing I had to learn. So when you look at these archetypes, you can also get the book to then find out about what the archetypes mean. And the archetype, it takes you on a journey from the worst part of the archetype, the belief systems that are connected with the archetype, and then how to shift that practically every day into a higher state. And the more you do it, it just starts to happen. And it's like, as well, you start to feel like when you start this deep work of looking at your shadow, what often happens is even your body changes. It'll like either you get thinner or you fill out a bit, like it's like coming back into balance. And you notice that your center, you come more into your center. So what happens is you're less affected by other people's shit. It's like someone will do something that used to drive you mental, and you'll literally watch it like a bullet coming towards you, and it's like slow motion. I'm not gonna actually take that today. It's like you just have more control of how things just don't penetrate and then completely wreck your day like they would have. It's like you witness yourself having this uncomfortable feeling, and then you're like, okay, I'll deal with that later. And I had an experience where I went to a festival and everyone was pissing me off at this festival. And then at some point, after talking to the 13th person, I was like, okay, babe, it's actually me. So I went home, I wrote down everyone's name, I wrote down every deal, and I looked at my chart and every single thing was in my chart. And I was like, oh my God, this is all me. Like I'm the one creating this experience with all of these people. Because I went to this festival in my shadow, and so I got everyone else in their shadow. So it's like it seemed kind of like a match. So, and also learning to just love yourself in these spaces. Sometimes just acknowledging, okay, I feel pretty crap right now, and I don't really like how I feel, but I'm just gonna love the fact that I'm here. I'm just gonna accept and love myself here in this space, and that in itself dissolves so much negative charge that it's actually easier to move out of those states. Once you get your chart, I highly recommend investing in the book if you can. And there's 3 courses on there. That go through each stage of your chart, and it takes months. Like each course can take you months because it's not a crash course. It's a gentle study of yourself. So you might, one day, like I was reading up about turbulence, like what is the shadow of turbulence? Turbulence is that feeling that we feel inside when we just feel unsettled, this unsettled discomfort in the physical body that has no real explanation what it's about. But that frequency is teaching us that sometimes it's just uncomfortable being in a human body, and that we should have empathy for other people and the discomfort that they're in and how they might treat us. And it teaches you empathy and compassion. Like that experience, I was like the biggest emotional wreck all of my 20s. And until I understood that that's what that pattern was teaching me, it was teaching me to have empathy for myself and compassion and also understanding for other people, and not to be in conflict with myself all the time that there's something wrong with me. So this is just one archetype. So there's so many, and there's 64 archetypes altogether, because you might learn stuff in your chart, but you might want to learn about what's in your husband's chart because it's affecting you, it's in your life. So we are experiencing all the other 64 archetypes because they're in other humans that are around us. So it's kind of like this fascinating journey where you get to learn that all the negative things you see in other people have a higher meaning, a higher lesson, and it's actually something not to be feared and something not to get bogged down. One thing I know is that with all negative emotions and states, what the mind thinks about that is what makes it worse. Like once you can be like in a place of equanimity and acceptance, it's like that, whatever that emotion is, it's not so bad anymore. But it's the mind. The mind doing its thing is what makes it 100 times worse. So the gene keys gave me the ability to teach my mind what's actually happening, so my mind can shut up and get out of the way so I can heal. So yeah.
Kim, you had, thank you so much, Nyanda. Kim, you had some comments?
Yeah, thank you.
We missed you last week.
Thank you. Yeah, talk about triggering. I've got my hand on the back of my neck and the hand on the heart, so that I can bring the best of me into the room. So if you want to say where would be better, I think hand on the forehead. Yeah, that feels much better. Hand on the forehead. So let me stick with the questions that I brought to the room, because I think those are the ones that will make the most difference in the largest area. I'm bringing my intention back. Thank you so much for just what I've heard. I didn't come last week because I felt triggered the week before. And here's the thing. If I say I have been triggered, that puts the responsibility and the power on the other person. What I'm learning is from this conversation is that if I'm willing to say, I am feeling discomfort, and own that, then I can stay grounded in the situation that I would have in the past called triggering, which then allows me to confront my own shadow and stay in love. So every time I come, I gain something, but I have to push through all of the things that I don't want to listen to in order to get there. I really don't want to listen. And so and I really don't want to listen to somebody talk about things that I really don't want to hear. When I realize that everybody really doesn't want to listen to stuff they really don't want to hear, then I can realize that the only difference between me and a white person is that God made me black. You know, that it's just a twist of genes and fate, that I'm on this side and they're on this side. And it's depression that makes me think that there is a side. So, so here's my experience. I grew up in a black community that was really safe, but my parents were alcoholics. So that's why I asked, would you talk about the effect of being in a black family where, as a child, the adults that look like you are sick. They're just really sick. And how do we handle that shadow? Then, in the 60s, and this is where I just realized that it must be very similar to children who are of mixed parentage that are black that are growing up in white. Because what if the child then is all through their life protected by white people? So then that's very confusing, because on the same time that a white person is protecting you, they're also using you in one way or another. That's the dynamic of it. And so then I find that I'm very close to, and I have a lot of love for white people, and through this conversation I'm beginning to see where that came from. It's because that was a sense of safety. The other wound is the wound of being dark-skinned in a brown body, because light-skinned people will then use their privilege in life, their step to it's like if you're on a bigger step and you see someone, you'll just step on their head. And that makes it really hard to feel safe around black people. So this is a very deep conversation. The other thing I will say is that coming from a place of love to a white person who really doesn't want to see what they really don't want to see, my experience is what they'll say is you're being mean. They'll say, no, I understand white privilege. This is a quote. I understand white privilege, and what you're telling me is not white privilege. I read a book, and what you're saying is white privilege is not white privilege. I'm doing something else. And one of the subtle ways of doing it is to then call out, well, because I'm a homosexual, or because I'm Jewish, or because I'm poor, the fact that, or how about I'm female, to deflect from the issue of that you're bringing to the table. So that's why I put those things in. Once I'm in fear, one of the things I'm going to do is deflect. I love what you said, if I can be mindful and say something like, I'm going to say a hurtful thing. Can we all take a deep breath? I'm going to put it on the table, and then let's see what we do with it. And then to be willing to wait, maybe months or years, for the circumstances to make this, because I've lost a lot of friendships in the last 5 years by telling white people what I feel, just what I feel or what I see, because they don't listen. And I've lost my job because it's possible to say, yes, we really believe, and believe with your mouth and not with your feet. And what I want to say is that in order to believe this conversation, from what I can see, is a white person has to suddenly become black. They do that at the expense of losing their privilege. Because once they start to care in a way that is required, there is a huge cost. There's a huge cost. And I honor that. It doesn't make them better. And you know what? We've been living with this cost for centuries. But we have to throw it on the table. You know? I'm taking a deep breath again. I'm taking a deep breath. Yeah, because, you know, during the 60s when white people began to step up, they were killed too. These kids that we're asking to get out there and be in front, what we have to realize is that when you step in front of black people, they will kill you. That's what happened here in Seattle. This is this is not something to play with. So, is that the intention? So yeah, coming from love is really important, but it's a deep abiding love.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what you're saying about the losing friends, and unfortunately, we live in a world. One of the other shadows that I actually forgot is denial, where people deny something's actually happening, completely flat out deny it. Like, I can't see that, that didn't happen. And that is actually another shadow pattern in the Gene Keys. And it's actually, the weird thing is you wouldn't think that the shadow of deafness is actually connected to the ability to have insight and an epiphany. But one thing I've recognized is that with communication, when we're trying to get someone to understand us or share something, a lot of it is down to delivery and timing. Because if you sense that, there are times where I want to say something even to my husband, but I can sense that now's not a good time. I'm just going to wait till he's in the vibe where we can have this conversation, because I know that last time we had this conversation, we got into a fight, so I'm just going to, it's like sometimes just sensing where people are at, and you can usually feel it by how open someone is, or sometimes I found that it helps to actually say, like what you said, Kim, about, warning someone that I'm going to say something and it's going to be uncomfortable, but do you give me permission to say it, in order so that we can have a healthier dynamic and a healthier, honest relationship. Most people are willing to do that. And I think if we don't come, it's also about delivery. I know with a lot of Black families, we didn't always learn good communication skills. A lot of the time when I was growing up, my parents delivered things through yelling, and cussing and stuff. And so, sometimes we think the way we're communicating is actually normal, but it's actually in a way that still has the energy of blame, or is a very accusatory in a way. So it's not the most perfect way to deliver something in a way where it's going to be fully received. And there's a technique to doing this. I remember learning about this, and it was a revelation, because, in the past, it's sometimes if you say something to someone, but you're saying it as, you did this and therefore that's made me, and you are this. And it's like how we say something to someone can either make them feel like they're being vilified, being attacked, or they can feel like, oh, my behavior triggered something in Kim that, based on stuff that's happened to her before, and it made her uncomfortable. Maybe I can just not do that thing that I do all the time. It's like, it's all about delivery, and we're all kind of learning this. I'm still learning and growing. And the wonderful thing as well is the Gene Keys does teach about communication. It does have that in the chart. It does have information about how we deal, how we communicate when we're triggered. So for me, when I'm triggered or I feel like someone's disrespected me, my mind, because I'm so like intelligent, my mind uses all of my intelligence to make that other person wrong, and it'll come out in the way that I communicate, and it will come out in a way that I don't realize that I'm doing it, but I'm actually shrinking them and hurting them with my words, even though I just think I'm talking normally. So this is something that everyone's going to have to learn how to actually, the more we come into the heart intentionally through our daily practice, the more that we actually start to realize how we communicate is affecting other people, and how to best communicate difficult conversations. I'll start with that one. And then the next thing you mentioned about the parents being alcoholics. My dad was actually an alcoholic, and it definitely created a lot of abandonment, feeling abandoned. And then the shadow of addiction in itself is actually connected to misused and misapplied creativity. So people who are actually addicts are very, very inventive people. They're people that actually have a lot of amazing ideas. They just have a really difficult time being in those spaces of silence where the creative idea is still like downloading in their consciousness. They have a difficult time being in those uncomfortable spaces. And usually parents who are, people who have addictions, they're usually very sensitive people as well. So they're very emotionally sensitive people who haven't learned or had mastery in how to manage their emotions. So they've learned to deal with stuff that's uncomfortable by just having a bottle, and then it becomes a daily habit, And I think for you, the biggest thing is recognizing that forgiving, allowing your inner child to be healed, because when we've had that, the part of us that's a child, the inner child, that part of us isn't really fully in this world, and so that can block our sense of adventure, our inventiveness, our self-belief in ourselves, our ability to recreate ourselves moment to moment. And so that's one of the most important things to heal, is your inner child, because without that part of you, it's very difficult to live a really fun life. It's like that part of us is the most funnest, most innocent, creative part of us. And so, so that's one of the things I would highly recommend as a way to kind of really make up for what you lost in your childhood. And there's a lot of stuff online now to do inner child healing. And I can't remember your other questions.
They're in I think you covered them well. They're in the chat. The other, I think the last thing that I'll do is to say thank you. Yes. To say that I heard what you said about the negative energies, and I think that it's really important for each of us to be really centered in that God consciousness.
I will add one thing as well to do with negative energies, is that the war that's happening right now in the world, it's a spiritual war. Because we are at a precipice as a human collective where we're about to make a quantum shift in our awareness. And there's dark forces that have been controlling things in this world for a very, very long time. It doesn't matter what religion you subscribe to. Everyone knows there's this other counter force that is hell-bent on suppressing us. And so these guys know that, and so recognizing the voice that is yours and the voice that has been implanted into your head, or through negative energies or whatever. And sometimes I hear a thought form that says like something really nasty, and I'm like, that's not me. Who's that? And I never used to distinguish that. I used to just believe whatever that thought was and think that I'm this horrible person who thinks these things. But I was like, that's actually not me. And then when I started to learn about clearing negative energy, I started to realize they were entities. Some entities are coming through our DNA so as we open up consciously, our DNA expands, and in that DNA, sometimes there is negative energies that are attached to the DNA. So they're coming out of our own aura because they've been attached to people in our family before, and it's like this thing. So, but you know, the voice of love is always for you. It is always supportive. It is always a nourishing, kind voice, and anything outside that is not. It's not really your soul. It's some other thing. You know, the shadow is, I could say the shadow is the disowned part of the soul. So the shadow is the disowned part of the soul that believes that everything bad that's happening is as a result of something outside me, and I have no control. That's usually the voice of the shadow. It's usually, I'm a victim of this. I'm a victim of not having enough money. I'm a victim of not feeling enough energy. Whatever it is, it's always like blame, blame, blame.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jana, you had a question?
Actually, not a question, but I just wanted to share in response to what Kim was saying. I just would like to say that, Kim, I really appreciate when you speak. All of the speakers are fantastic. Swati's done an amazing job of bringing people here, but I'll be honest in that the most benefit that I receive from these calls are hearing people like you, and Chevy always contributes, and that other woman who is like DLK 19555 or whatever she's on today. But to hear you guys, you speak in relation to a lot of the talks that are going on for me has been extremely beneficial. And often I hear you say that you're uncomfortable with something, and yet you continue to show up. And just on a personal note, I really, really appreciate that, because you always share an insight for me that I maybe haven't ever been exposed to or don't understand. And so thank you for having the courage to stand up like that. And I just wanted to share one thing that has stuck in my mind a lot, especially around circles like this, is that often we equate when we're comfortable that we are safe. And therefore, as a result of that, when we are uncomfortable, we automatically jump to being, then we must be unsafe. And that when I start to recognize that when I am uncomfortable, I start to want to get out of there, I start to want to flee. If I can really understand that it's actually just discomfort. I'm not unsafe. And like in this circle, I'm not unsafe, I'm just uncomfortable. And we're so trained to not feel uncomfortable. We want to get rid of any discomfort that we feel. And to flee is usually a good response to that. And just understanding that it may just be discomfort and not being unsafe. And so when I recognize that within myself, to really just take a couple of deep breaths and sit with that. Okay, well, this is uncomfortable, and I can still show up, and I can still be in this space. And I just learned a lot, because there's been a lot of times I've felt uncomfortable with things that are being said or things that are being discussed. But it's just been really helpful for me to remember that. So I just offer that if it's helpful at all.
Thank you, Jana. Cal, you had also a comment? I don't know if Cal is still here.
Yeah,
Yes.
you mean Kyle?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that, this has been very enlightening for me. Articulating, putting into words what I've not really been able to understand and express. So I appreciate everyone sharing. And I'm also wondering if the recording is going to be available later, because I really need to sit with this much, much more.
Yeah. Anyone else who wanted to share something?
Annette?
Annette?
Yes. Hi, Neander. Hi, Max. Wow.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Every time I've had a question, I've just breathed and listened and sat, and then it's sort of would transmute, and I'd be like, oh, okay. There is something, though, that I do find myself trying to discern between and navigate. And when Kim spoke, it really surfaced. And actually now with Jana again, and, you know, as I do this work here in South Africa, where I feel like the intensity is a lot more palpable, and that there are communities that are really unsafe. And it makes me very emotional, because there's a part of me that's like, I have such a big heart, and my higher self is like, you know, stay in love, stay in love, stay in love. And then there's another side of me that's like, this warrior that's so angry and that wants to fight, you know, and bring justice. And I wonder, you know, for how many centuries this pain has been inflicted. And I know, you know, in some ways I understand, because as, you know, a woman who's dealt with her own oppression and like sexual abuse, and, you know, not letting my own trauma be coming from that space, you know, but yeah, just wondering sometimes if it maybe takes a warrior, and what does a warrior look like? And I know it's love, and then I have to kind of remind myself, and I'm even speaking to myself in this, yeah, the discernment between the higher self, who sometimes bypasses, and then the higher self who knows that it is always going to be love. But sometimes it's, I don't know, what is the warrior? What is justice? How do we balance the scales? You know, how much of this can we just have in this safe circle where we're showing up, but then there's this whole other world out there?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that the warrior is being able to stay fully present and aware, even though all of this is happening around you and there's so much trauma and so much hurt and even danger and pain is around you, still being able to stay fully grounded and present and aware. And that awareness in itself will bring you that connection to your higher self, which will then allow you to download and to connect and move into the direction that you're needing to go to get to the help that you need, perhaps, and also, yeah, and the answers that you're seeking, and the direction and path that you can actually take to make a change. But the main thing is starting there with that presence. And even though there's pain and trauma and all this stuff that's trying to break down that presence, is still staying there. That's the warrior, is the presence within that.
Do you do anything creative?
I've recently started writing more, but no, not lately as much.
I just got, when you were speaking, that's a really big part of how you need to express your warrior is creatively. So there is a thing called creative activism, where you can take all of this raw emotion that you're feeling and put it into something. You know, it could be writing, could be art, it's whatever, and it doesn't have to be perfect. But that emotion that you've turned into something beautiful will inspire and open someone else's heart, and it will help. Because I feel like the revolution that we're experiencing right now, the greatest healing is going to come through creativity. It's going to come through songs that move us to a whole new, another place. It's going to come through artwork that just opens the heart. This is the beauty of creativity. It bypasses the mind, and it's like it's the universal language that breaks down all barriers, that if anyone sees it, doesn't matter what body they're in, what circumstance or language they speak, it literally opens their heart in a certain way, and they get the download. So this is something that I feel like for a lot of us who are struggling with emotions and we don't know what to do with them, it's just taking up a hobby of anything that interests you. Could be making clay, anything, and it does not have to be perfect. Just be like a child, like children. Just try stuff, even if it's going to be uncomfortable and weird. They just go, I'm going to try this thing, and before you know it, it becomes something that really gives back to you. So this is something that we haven't been taught in Western cultures, but in especially ancient cultures, they always use the hands. And they've always used the body, because the body brings you back to presence. The hands are also like a meditation as well. And they also, and channeling and taking all of that stuff in the head and turning it into something beautiful is healing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I also want maybe to share like a spiritual practice that has been really helpful for me, because I really feel, Annette, what you were sharing, because definitely living in Africa, I feel that is our, especially if you're privileged and sensitive, that's kind of part of daily life, is you're seeing all these things and your heart is constantly like stabbed. And we live in that constant, being stabbed in the heart. For me, a practice that has been helpful comes from, my Christian practice, and kind of, I think it doesn't need to be necessarily associated with a religion, but, I resonate a lot with, kind of the whole spiritual experience of the Passion of Christ. And I think there is something there, spiritually that I found very helpful, because there is something in love in really feeling the pains and how you are able actually to transmute that pain. And I think this is why even the word passion, we see passion as this extreme love, and the extreme love in this context of the Christ experience has also extreme suffering. But at no moment the Christ experience is one of despair, of anger, of hopelessness. It's a transmutation of all of the pains, and if you imagine, that when Jesus was in Gethsemane, in that Garden of Olives, had that moment where he was, and that's the real passion. It's not the crucifixion and all, is the carrying of all the suffering of the world, and in that moment, and we're just, that sweat of blood, and that moment of transmutation. And I think for me, there's a very powerful meditation there on how the human and the divine, and I think that's also the teachings there, is that Jesus is that divine and human, and Jesus is all of us, it's in all of us, and we're able to actually carry that pain and transmute it into that unconditional love. And that's the passion that we can experience every day and transmute every day. And so it actually is an empowering passion. The spiritual experience of passion is one of empowerment. And so that I found for me has been a very, again, being in the context of Africa, where you're constantly faced with that, and you have to constantly deal with so much, so much. We have to deal with the oppressor, oppressed, but we also have to deal with, post-colonialism and all of that. In some instances, our own people doing worse than before, but we understand, all the challenge that come with that. I mean, it's a very complex environment that we're living every day, and the poverty and the privilege and the differences and the insecurity. I mean, it's living in Africa is a little bit like a minefield of emotion. But that's, so that's transmutation of passion.
I wanted to add as well that the shadow of oppression, the gift is transmutation. That's actually the higher gift. So whenever you're in a place of oppression, the other side of oppression is transmuting it into a higher frequency. And actually, all beings, to the journey of enlightenment, we will all go through a passage of having to face deep pain and trauma that's in our bodies, because the things that are happening in Africa, that pain is in all of us, every single one of us. And so that story of Christ is a story that these are the initiations that will happen to every single human being at some point on their journey, where they will have to face the deepest pain and suffering that they have and come back to love through that pain and come back even stronger. And the other thing is that a truly open heart cannot be overwhelmed by life. A truly open heart, because your heart just keeps expanding and it keeps getting bigger and it just swallows it. It just does. And, sometimes I'm not even fully there yet, but, I know I've witnessed the things I've moved through as a human being, and I'm just like, I can't believe I'm still here. So,
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. How do you spell the website that you're referring us to go to? Gene?
so GENEKEYS.
Okay, so .com. It is okay.
So it's about the genetics, and the mystery and the magical story of the genetics.
Yeah,
It's an astrology site.
Okay, I think it's an opportunity, especially like here in America, where we're experiencing losing our democracy and we're experiencing losing our freedoms, our ability just to live as equals in our mail-in voting, and so many things here that have changed. That it's awakened me and has helped me so much just to be able to look beyond those things into the deeper things that I can have within myself to feel secure and to feel safe. So this experience today, I want to say thank you, because the genes we've learned about, but being able to experience those ancestors and take away what they're trying to transform us into becoming is going to answer a lot of my questions as far as what am I to do with this. And now that I have it, how do I know? You don't know, but now that I have it, I know that I'll be able to make those steps in the right direction and become even stronger in my journey with Christ as we are being moved from one place to the next. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome, Patricia. And I wanted to share that in these times, because we're also feeling it here in Australia as well, that they're taking away more and more of our rights. And it feels suffocating. But, these times I've decided to just go deeper into my faith and deeper into those parts of myself that I most fear. And I'm experiencing a kind of freedom like I've never felt before within myself. And so they can try and lock us up, they can try and separate us, but they'll never take our love away. They can never ever do that. So, that's the one thing that we do have, and within that we will overcome, because, all human beings, we're all connected on a mental and a mind level as well. So, when you experience freedom, Patricia, that is liberating the whole minefield of all of humanity. It's like the more of us that are lighting up at home, the more the whole collective frequency changes. And when that changes, miracles honestly happen. And I really believe that.
We're already over time, so we're just going to take one last comment before we close. So I don't know if anyone who hasn't spoken yet, wanted to share something.
I'll share. This is Barbara from Seattle, Swaady.
Hey, Barbara.
Hello. Nina, I wanted to actually take your comment to heart, because I'm also sitting in venues where there's black and white and we're trying to come together and understand each other. But I found that when I am uncomfortable, that's where I can grow and shift my mind. And what I do is I leave those venues and I come to this venue where everywhere is love, so that I can learn and shift my mind to that's the place that I should be at when I go into those venues. And being a school teacher and teaching young children is that I'm learning so much from these circles that I can implement that in the younger children that are going to make our world better. And so that's why I come to these venues, to learn, to grow. They're uncomfortable, not this one, but the other ones I go to that are trying to understand each other. It's uncomfortable for me too, but it's helping me to grow, to shift my mind, to listen, to go deeper into my own being and see what I need to work on to be able to change, make that difference. So I commend you for bringing that to this circle. And so I'll be praying for you. And thank you so much, speakers. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Max. And I learned so much from you. And thank you for the website. I'm going to go to it. And thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So thank you, everyone. Like, we've learned so much as well from you guys, and it's just so healing to know that there's so many of us that are on this journey. You've all given me so much hope in humanity, and it's like the best feeling.
Me too. Thank you so much, guys. I'm so grateful for being here, and thank you, Swaady, for having us on this program. And so lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to ask Max or Nyanda, or both of them, to close the circle. And before that, just saying thank you again to everyone. And as usual, please share with your networks. This month we have a really amazing lineup of people, different experiences. And just to continue to do the work. And I would say, as we have all these weeks for each of us to really think, what is it that we take away, and what is it that we can change from this learning. So thank you, everyone. And then Nyanda and Max, if you want to close the circle.
Thank you to the I Am Presence of all the beings here tonight. Thank you to the divine helpers for helping us transmute and clear negative energy tonight. Please dismantle the energy field. Down to that core beyond into our lives. Thank you so much, everyone. It was amazing.
Thank you, everyone. Stay blessed and keep doing the inner work. There are times where you just want to check out, but honestly, it will pay you back so much more, and you will be in a completely different place next year and the future to come. So just persist and know that you got this, and it doesn't matter what life throws at you. It is always an incredible opportunity to learn something about yourself. So yeah.
And thank you, Max and Nyanda. We're really sending you blessings, that you always be strengthened in your work, that you always get all the resources and support to continue make the change that is all needed. We're so grateful for you both, for the dedication and for really being of service to all of us. So we're so grateful. Thank you for your time, and again, blessings. We love you.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. And that's the end of our circle. We hope everyone who's been online you've enjoyed, and register on the website so you can join on our Zoom. Blessings.